IVM. Hello, welcome, Khushamadid. You're hearing The Note with me, Mahrukh Inayat. At a time when 3 former Chief Ministers of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir have been charged under the Public Safety Act, there are hardly any voices coming out of the valley, except for this one lone voice that has resonated not just across the country, but internationally. That of the daughter of former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, her daughter, Iltija Mufti. And she's with me on The Note. Thank you, Iltija, for joining me on such short notice. And I must start at the very outset to say that you have been an incredibly straightforward voice from Kashmir. At a time when everybody is choosing their words, I think you have come out as a breath of fresh air, not just that, and also someone who passionately feels about Kashmir and doesn't spare her words. Has that been tough for you?
To be honest, yes. I feel like, since my mother's incarceration, it's been like a, double catastrophe for my family, for us. And I feel like I've been thrown into the deep end because I'm a very private person and I've never given a single interview. I didn't know what a live interview, how to do it, who to speak to in the media. So yes, I feel like I was thrown into the deep end. And for me, it was like either, I sink or I swim. So yes, I would say that it was tough. And the current atmosphere in the country is such, Mahrukh, that if you speak up, you're instantly termed or, berated as an anti-national if you speak against the government. So, I would definitely say that this hasn't been easy. It's been full of challenges for me, to do what I've been doing for the past 7 months now.
But, it's been more than 6 months now since the abrogation of Article 370. How has life changed for you?
Well, I think for everybody from Jammu and Kashmir, I won't say just Kashmiris, I think that I narrow it down by just saying Kashmiri. I think for every resident of Jammu and Kashmir, life has completely changed. You have abnormal is the new normal, I would say, and there is this very strange template for normalcy. If you were to ask me, meeting my mother in jail has become my normal. Being frisked before I meet my mother has become the new normal. Being manhandled on my grandfather's death anniversary has become the new normal. And I think for all of us from Jammu and Kashmir, there's been this tremendous psychological crisis. And obviously, we've been kind of like crippled financially as well. And it's taken a toll on all of us emotionally, physically, financially. So, as a Kashmiri, I feel terribly.
But tell me something. You just mentioned that you have met Ms Mufti, and I refer to your mother. We've seen one recent photograph of Mr. Umar Abdullah where he has grown a beard and he's looking nearly all white. How is Mrs. Mufti doing, and what is she saying? Have you got a chance to really have a conversation with her?
I mean, of course, when I meet her, our conversations revolve around family. I would say family is like 20%, 80% is politics and what's happening. You see, when a person is in solitary confinement, Mahrukh, whoever that person is going to meet, they'll want as much information as possible, because all of a sudden you're confined to this tiny room and your contact with the outside world is shut. I mean, of course, she has access to a television, but human contact, human interaction is something else. My mother, she's doing fine. She's got great strength. In fact, you and I were just talking and I was telling you that she's a very stubborn person. So touchwood, alhamdulillah, she has great inner spirit. And, we've deliberately made it a point that her pictures don't come out in the press because I feel like it might trivialize her detention. And I think whatever has happened is very serious and I don't want to trivialize any aspect of it.
But you're using her Twitter account. For many of our listeners who might not know, Iltija has taken on the onus of tweeting on behalf of her mother, Mehbooba Mufti. How have you managed to do that? How have you tried to, in a way, try and give voice to what perhaps Mehbooba Mufti would be feeling right now? Or is this a younger version, a junior Mehbooba Mufti talking?
Oh no, I think I think I'm so much more different from my mother. I am quite like fiery and I feel like I'm as feisty as she is. But in a lot of ways, our opinions don't match. And we have so many arguments even at home. You know, at the end of the day, she's my mother. But I think we also like agree to disagree on a lot of things. But the reason why I decided to run her handle, Maruk, was not to voice her opinion, but to talk about the overall situation in Kashmir. You know, as you just mentioned 5 minutes ago, there are hardly any voices that are emanating from the valley, you know, genuine voices that are talking about how crippling this shutdown has been, you know, following the scrapping of Article 370. And I have to tell you that one of the first notes that my mother wrote to me was that please don't tweet, because she was told that if your daughter tweets, you know, we can throw her into jail and we'll charge her, you know, for impersonating you. And that's just so ridiculous and so stupid. But I am also my mother's daughter. And so, you know, I felt like what I was doing was not wrong. And I used the handle, you know, to not like indulge in like spreading rumors or hatred or just negativity, but try to give an insight. You know, it's kind of like a window to what's happening in the state right now.
I read one of your interviews and you mentioned that you actually sent a note to Mrs. Mehbooba Mufti in a rolled chapati. Is that true?
No, so actually what happened was that because these people, you know, I would say, you know, Zoi for Zalim, J for Jalad, Jim for Jalad, Zoi for Zalim. If I have to describe this government, I'll say Zoi for Zalim, Jim for Jalad. What happened is that when they took my mother, they made sure that she would not be able to communicate with us. And this went on for like, you know, a good month. And they literally wanted to break her emotionally. So we had to come up with our own jugaad. I think if you're an Indian or a Pakistani, jugaad runs through our veins, you know. You will always circumvent these rules and you know what I'm trying to say. So basically what happened is that my mom sent me a note which we found in a tiffin box. And, you know, when it came down to writing a reply, I wrote a reply, but at the end I was worried. I thought, my God, how do we send this? Because, you know, all her stuff, whatever we sent was being checked, double checked, triple checked. So suddenly my grandmother came out with this idea. She said, listen, why don't you do one thing? Write it and give it to me. And, you know, I followed my grandmother into the kitchen and she took the A4 size note that I wrote. She took that paper and she folded it into a square, I think 10-20 times. And then she put it into a transparent cover and she rolled it inside a chapati. And we had basically, you know, our helper who would go to give this tiffin to my mother, we told him that you just tell her that eat the chapati carefully. So I communicated with her like this for the next, about 3-4 weeks. That's how we communicated with each other. So that was my way of getting a jugaad around, you know, whatever they were trying to do.
Let me ask you, you said that a lot of people who are currently in the rest of the country who seem to be satisfied with the abrogation of Article 370 or really might not really have an opinion per se.
Yeah.
There are some who say it's a good decision and who would naturally be critical of the stand that you have taken. But by and large, most of the people have spoken out against the illegal detention of not just your mother but the other political leaders. What has been the reaction that you have got in Kashmir?
Maruk, first of all, if you don't mind, like I just want to say a little about what, you know, the first part of your question was. You said that they feel that whatever has happened is okay. You see, abrogation of 370, whether it should have been done or not is a separate question. But the way it's done was illegal. And you kind of like violated the constitution, which is like a holy scripture in our country. So I feel that something is terribly wrong if you endorse the way they did it. Anyways, moving on, you're asking me about the response of like the average Kashmiri. The average Kashmiri has so much anger towards mainstream politicians because they feel vindicated. They feel that you went with BJP, you believed in the idea of India, and this is what you got. And let's not, be deluded. There is an overwhelming sentiment amongst Kashmiris right now about, being dissatisfied with this country. They feel terribly let down. So a lot of them feel like, my mother, got punished for siding with India. And I think for the rest of the country, this is not something that they should celebrate, because essentially what you've done is that you've removed the buffer between the country and, Jammu and Kashmir.
So I'm going to ask you, do you, in retrospect, not as a politician since you're not one, but as somebody who's closely linked to a very strong political party from the valley, do you feel that it was the right decision to ally with the BJP?
Sometimes when you see decisions in hindsight, you're like, you know what, this didn't work out. But Maru, I think what matters the most and is of paramount importance is the intention. You see, they did not have a wrong intention to begin with, but was it a bad decision? Of course it was. When I look in hindsight and retrospect, I mean, this was a terrible decision. BJP and PDP were like oil and water. They never mixed. But I mean, look at the state of politics in India right now, Maruk. You're seeing states where SP, BSP are coming together. Shiv Sena and NCP have come together along with Congress. So you see, it's very tough. Regional politics is a different ball game altogether, Maruk. In a state like Jammu and Kashmir, where your mandate is so fragmented, you cannot just ignore the mandate of a crucial part of your state and say, to hell with it, I'm going to ignore this. I think my grandfather had that kind of like vision where he did not want to disrespect the mandate of his own people. But did it work out? No, it didn't work out.
Now, talking of the mandate of the people, right? Soon after Article 370, many political pundits said that it's going to be a while till democracy is kind of reinstated in the valley. Earlier this month, there was a decision taken by the Chief Electoral Officer who said that panchayat elections are going to happen, even though that decision has now been postponed. But there was an eagerness across all political parties, from the PDP to the National Conference and the Congress, saying that they want to take part as long as their detained leaders are released. I'm saying, where is this willingness come to take part in elections when there is so much anger, as you yourself say, on the ground? Who's going to come out and vote? Or is it that election is being seen as separate from the abrogation of Article 370?
Well, Maruk, our political party, my mother's political party, didn't issue any statement of this sort. I think you're talking about the National Conference, right? You see what?
No, even certain sections of the PDP also kind of agreed that the election should happen.
Yeah. I mean, look, at some point that debate has to start. You have to understand that mainstream politics in Kashmir, or any form of politics in Kashmir, has been in deep freeze mode since August. In a state where there's already, a kind of like a tendency towards separatism, towards radicalization, I think it's a disaster if you just lock up all the politicians. And you see, this could be a way, this could be a tactic of putting pressure on the administration to release all these leaders. But I don't see the point of these elections. I mean, after what they've done, the way they've violated our rights, it just doesn't make sense to talk about elections right now. Our economy has been completely crippled and we're in such a bad state. I think elections shouldn't even be anybody's priority right now. There has to be an instant re-engagement with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, because that gap, that trust deficit is only increasing with every passing day.
Iltija, why wouldn't you? You're already a political voice. Why would you not want to join politics? It seems to be the natural progression.
Because I've seen what it is, Maruk, and I've seen, how toxic, how dirty it gets, and hats off to my mother, hats off to every, woman who's in this field in today's day and age. I mean, I've seen how toxic and, it's given me so much anxiety these past 7 months, and I don't want people to trivialize it. I've seen my mother work so hard. A good politician is not just somebody who gives good interviews, You need to have that grassroots connect with like a Kashmiri, with your party worker. And I don't think if I'm the right person, to begin with, I don't even know how to speak full Kashmiri. So I think I would be a complete misfit.
Well, that I don't think would make you a misfit. There are many within the political mainstream in Kashmir who can't speak the language very well. Anyways, both your mother and Mr. Omar Abdullah have been sworn political rivals, right? Over the years, fighting elections, belonging to two different dynasties, political dynasties and parties. Both of them today face a similar fate. Do you see them coming out? And this is just I want to, rack your brains and see how you answer. Do you see them coming out and fighting against each other? Is that a possibility? Or will that politician in them come out once they're out of, this detention?
I'm going to answer this question as a Kashmiri and not as Mehbooba Mufti's daughter. I think when I think about this whole crisis, the only silver lining is that maybe for a change, everybody in the valley, everybody in Jammu and Kashmir will be on the same page, And I think the first priority for NC or PDP should be to secure the future of their own people instead of fighting amongst themselves, between themselves, pointing fingers and being at each other's throats. If that can happen, well and good. But if it can't, well, then, too bad. What can I say? But, I think all of Jammu and Kashmir wants these regional parties to come together and, instead of just being engaged in like that, political rivalry, because right now people feel like they've been left in the lurch and someone has to come and kind of like rescue them. You see, there is anger against the mainstream, but people also realize that, these are their own leaders, these are their own people. So I just hope and I just pray that like when they come out, it's not your usual, NC did this, PDP did this. I hope they can find a common ground and articulate, the concerns of the people to the rest of the country.
Finally, Iltija, the BJP government at the centre, their stand has consistently been, and many governments before that Kashmir is an internal issue for the country. But after the abrogation of Article 370, we've seen the issue being internationalized like pretty much never before. Where is the solution according to you?
Oh my God, I think I'm a complete like radical liberal if you ask me. If you were to ask me, I would give you an answer which would, people would call me an anti-national. But I think that Jammu and Kashmir will be solved only if you give it more autonomy and, kind of like let it be a part of India, but at the same time, let us be semi-autonomous, and where you kind of like make borders irrelevant. You see, Kashmir has a very rich culture. We have these amazing influences from Iran, from, Central Asia. And that happened because we used to have trade routes which would go extensively through these countries. And I think the only way of making Jammu and Kashmir what it truly used to be and make sure that we realize our true potential is by making borders irrelevant, and kind of like throwing it open for trade and just letting it be semi-autonomous. But in my mind, I think that would be the ideal solution. But you don't have a leader with that kind of a vision who would want to implement something like that. So yeah, I think that's what they should do. But the government has obviously tied itself up in knots. They say it's an internal matter, but then they get diplomats, they get envoys, and then they say, no, it is an internal matter when another diplomat comes and she doesn't endorse their view. So I think it's very embarrassing for India, Mahrukh. We've cultivated so much soft power over the decades, and this has been done with so much hard work. Just to consolidate their vote bank, BJP is really ruining the image and the reputation of this country. It seems like it's, irreversible damage. So that's what concerns me a lot.
For speaking your mind and for not mincing your words, Iltija Mufti, thank you so much for speaking to me on The Note.
Thank you for having me, Mahrukh.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are @IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm Mahrukh Inayat on Twitter and Mahrukh Inayat on Instagram as well.
I hope you enjoyed that show. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, HDFC Life and Paytm Money. And let me tell you a couple of things that you should check out this week. On Litnama, Lakshmi talks to Hardik Waghela and Mohammad Muneem from the band The Words of Alif. They talk about how the band came to be and more. On Football the guys talk about Liverpool qualifying for the Champions League, City getting banned from it, and Arsenal thrashing Newcastle for a 4-0 win. On Golgappa, tune into a Laugh Riot episode where host Tripti talks to Karan and Neil from Bhadipa. On our Kannada podcast Thale Harate, Ramya Bhaskar and Sridhar Pabisetti talk to Ganesh and Pawan about reimagining school education for Industry 4.0. On Tapri Tales, Madhuri tells a tale of her struggle with keeping cockroaches away from the kitchen while wondering why there are no cockroaches in her mother's kitchen. On Beyond Cliché, Almas is joined by the Mahi Way actor Pushti Shakti to talk about beauty beyond size. Thanks and keep listening.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is dead.